lore within the gaming universe has to be one of the coolest things ever, and Pokemon is a universe that has tons of it. From the franchise starting off with you being a 10-year-old trainer using your Pokemon to take down Mafia mob bosses, to now you being a 10-year-old boy somehow using the same power to stop people from destroying the entire universe. So we've definitely come a long way, but all of this happens for a reason, and it's because of the Pokemon universe lore. Some of my favorite pieces of lore in the entire franchise are revealed in the 4th generation, which happens to be one of the best generations, by the way, where we find out this guy, Arceus, is the god of Pokemon. He created the entire universe. With his godlike power, he even ended up creating Dialga and Palkia to control space and time, and he also made Garantina, and the rest starts trickling out from there. But there's always been a lot of mystery surrounding Arceus. For one, what is even this guy's motive? He practically is more of a bystander in this universe and not really doing much at all. Second of all, we also learned that the Arceus that we know isn't even the real Arceus. He's just a fragment of himself so that we're able to perceive him, so I wonder what the original Arceus looks like. But by far the biggest mystery on this Pokemon is what is going on with that creepy ass symbol that appears whenever you fight him. This has been a topic of debate in the community for a while, with some people thinking this symbol is just a stylistic choice and has no meanings, and while others, like myself, believe that this symbol is the single most important key to unlocking the mysteries of the Pokemon universe. And thank God, because we don't have to speculate anymore, because we kind of have an answer to this. Recently, and unfortunately, Game Freak had a massive leak within their company, and within this leak, there was a lot of cool and old information that came out, including Pokemon lore. And just to be clear, I will not be talking about any of the leaks that are out right now, or future leaks that pertain to the future of the Pokemon franchise, so you're good on spoilers. But the one thing I will be talking about, which is single-handedly the most important and interesting information from this entire leak, is the Generation 4 drafts of the lore. There was a transcript and a Pokemon chart that came out that single-handedly answer a bunch of our Pokemon questions that we've had for years. Kind of, because I'm gonna figure out if this is all canon or even relevant to today. So let's go over some of the original proposed and lost lore in the Pokemon universe. In the beginning, there was a vortex of chaos, and one day, in the midst of all this chaos, a large egg appeared in the center of it. This egg continued to shake for a very long time, but never hatched, until eventually the vortex stopped, and the egg broke open, and the Pokemon that came out from this egg was the being known as Arceus. Now, everything wasn't fine for Arceus, because the fragments of the broken egg ended up turning into giants, and they started attacking Arceus, and they ended up having a massive battle. Arceus ended up growing in power a lot and being able to defeat the giants, but the giants ended up doing a number on him, wounding Arceus severely. So Arceus decided to take his 2 wounded pieces of his body and poured the giant's blood into them, creating 2 new Pokemon, one known as the God of Light, Dialga, and the God of Darkness, which would be Palkia. Now bear with me, because a lot of you guys may be thinking, what about Garantina? And I'll answer that in a bit, because this story gets a lot more complicated. But for now, it looks like Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia were the only things in existence. They were just floating around in a space of nothingness, doing literally nothing all day long. And this can get pretty boring. So Dialga and Palkia decided to do the only reasonable thing imaginable, falling in love with each other and having a bunch of kids. Hey, Palkia, I got something I need to tell you.
Oh, hey, what's up, Dialga? I got something I need to tell you too.
Okay, well, I'll just get it off my chest. I don't want to make things awkward with us being gods and all, but I think I like you. I don't really know what to say, Dialga. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. No, you're good. I was gonna actually ask you if you want to get married. What? Yeah, with us just floating around all day and the fact that Arceus isn't even talking to us, living in his own world, I ended up falling in love with you, and I want to actually create the universe. You may think I'm joking, but that's legitimately the original plotline. Dialga and Palkia had a bunch of kids, and they all ended up dying because they had nowhere to live. They were still just floating in the middle of nothingness, and Dialga and Palkia got pretty sad that a bunch of their children just kept dying. So, for these 2 Pokemon to overcome their great sadness, they decided, hey, let's use our godlike powers to actually create the universe so our children have a livable place to be in. And if you want to make me not sad like Dialga and Palkia, please hit the subscribe button. Less than 5% of the people that watch the videos are even subscribed, and we are so close to 100k, so it'll make a huge difference if you subscribe. And with that, the start of the Pokemon universe was born because two lovers were sad a bunch of their children were dying because they didn't take care of them properly. With the world finally being made, they had 3 final children, which would be the Mesprit spirits. It is foretold that when Uxie opened its eyes when it was first born, it allowed color to be into the world. When Mesprit was born, it wished that everything in the world could be felt, so a sense of touch was now developed. And when finally Azelf was born, when it shouted, everything seemed blessed and stopped trembling. And these 3 Pokemon are allegedly the foundation for all the life in the Pokemon world, because now they planted the seeds to breed life and nurture it. But with all that being said, and me finally laying the blueprint of the original Pokemon story, how does it even hold up today? Because there are a few major inherent flaws with the way this story was portrayed. One, the biggest question, like I mentioned earlier, where the hell is Garantina? Palkia is described to be the god of darkness in this original folklore, but in our universe, we know that Garantina is actually that Pokemon. The only explanation on why Garantina wasn't in the original lore is just because he didn't exist yet. The only other thing that piqued my interest through all this lore, and probably the most relevant thing, is the Arceus triangle. This image represents the visual representation on how the Pokemon world was created. And if you're wondering if it looks familiar, it literally fully matches what the Arceus symbol is when you verse him throughout many games. So it's pretty nice to see that something that people thought was a theory for a really long time is true and confirmed within the Pokemon universe. Arceus literally has the symbol of the origin of the universe. The most interesting thing in these rough drafts is at the center, it's Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia, but in the official games, there's actually a 3rd circle in the center, which would be Garantina, which just supports the theory that Garantina did not exist when the original lore was created. When we head to the outskirts of the circle, we have Azelf, Mesprit, and Uxie, because those are the next 3 Pokemon that were created. Then when we look at the outskirts of the circle, we see Rayquaza, Kyogre, and Groudon, the next Pokemon that were appointed by these spirits, Rayquaza being the pillar of the sky, Groudon being the pillar of the land, and Kyogre being the pillar of the sea. And this part of the lore makes complete sense since this is true in the games too. But the only thing that doesn't make sense is that these Pokemon, Groudon, Rayquaza, and Kyogre, ended up appointing other Pokemons to be like guardians in their place. Kyogre ended up picking Latios, Metagross, and Latias to watch the sea. Groudon ended up picking these 3 Pokemon we have no idea who they are. Their names are just Dabu, Sand, and Gordon. And Rayquaza's choices happen to be the most controversial one, where it happens to be Dragonite, Gyarados, and Tyranitar. The most confusing Pokemon out of all these is Gyarados, because the rest of the Pokemon are at least pseudo-legendaries or legendaries, but Gyarados is just a regular Pokemon. But I would argue that it's okay for Gyarados to be here. Even though they're not the most credible, Gyarados' early Pokédex entries consistently referred to it to being able to stop past wars, with its Pokemon Crystal entry literally saying it appears whenever there's a world conflict, burning down any place it travels through. Throughout the rest of this triangle, there are a lot more Pokemon that are mentioned, like the legendary birds, Mew, Celebi, Deoxys, and Jirachi, and a few other Pokemon that we don't know, that all have some sort of ties to the grander Pokemon universe. But in all honesty, a lot of these Pokemon, to today's standards, wouldn't even fit this list. Online, a bunch of people have made their own depictions on what the filled out chart would be, and I like these a lot more because back then they just had less Pokemon to work with, just trying to fill in the gaps with anybody. The final and coolest thing that I found in this original lore is that they give us a clear distinction on what makes a Pokemon and what makes a human a human. It is said that the God of Light, which would have been Dialga in this continuity, created all the Pokemon, and anything that resembles Dialga genetically is a Pokemon, while the God of Darkness, which would be Palkia in this story, ended up making all the humans. So I guess maybe there's some type of wordplay that humans are evil and Pokemon are good, but I don't know. It is really cool seeing where Game Freak was heading with the original Pokemon plotline, and I'm sure some of the details in these stories are still relevant to today, but overall you can tell that the direction the Pokemon universe went is nowhere near the same direction that these original drafts were, so I'm gonna chop most of this all up as non-canon and lost forgotten plot. But something that was forgotten that I think will come back is Eevee getting a brand new evolution in the new Pokemon game. So click the video on your screen to figure out why I think Eevee will evolve into a dragon type.